You are listening to the Irvin V. Griffin Jr. podcast here on Spreaker.com. Hey, this is Irvin V. Griffin Jr. I'm not going to take very long on this. I'm just doing a quick podcast on something that I thought I'd do be a little bit more fun and a little bit more reflective about my life and times as it relates to my memories of this late rapper. Name was Tupac Shakur. And, of course, everybody knows of him and has heard of him. My first memories of Tupac, or hearing Tupac, was the song Brenda's Got a Baby back in the early 90s. And I'd heard he had been in trouble in and out. I really didn't get into him until the song called Me Against the World and Dear Mama. That album is when I first really got into him. Then I went back and listened to some of his other stuff, like from Tupacalypse, and of course the album that had Round and Round. And of course, I didn't realize it, but I had a Digital Underground album that actually had him on it, and I didn't realize he was even on it until I went back and listened closely, like Dolio Flow. Then of course he had that song called Same Song, which was a massive hit. So, and my impressions of him as a person is basically a strong-willed person, if not a very out-of-control person. And he was a very intelligent person. Now, the whole thing with the charge that he went to jail on, as we've learned in recent times, basically that was a railroad job, in my opinion. He basically took this one woman back to his hotel room, did his business with her. He goes to sleep in another room, and then later she's up in his face talking about she's going to get him. He later gets hit with what people incorrectly call a rape charge, when in fact he did not go to jail for rape. He went to jail for sexual abuse. The prosecutor wanted to send him to jail for rape, but the problem was when Tupac's defense lawyer got her on the stand, she basically, I forgot whether it was a he or she, but they basically broke her down, and she ended up admitting that it was not Tupac who actually raped her, but it was the two gentlemen that was with, who strangely enough never was called to the stand, as far as I know, in this whole trial. Yet Tupac nonetheless went to jail for sexual abuse. They really wanted to send him up on a rape charge, and even to this day, when people talk about that, a lot of them will still say he went to jail for rape, which is incorrect. He did not go to jail for rape. In fact, they even admitted in court that Tupac actually did not rape this woman. That it was the two friends who, strangely enough, as far as I know, were never charged. Which makes you wonder if there wasn't something behind the scenes going on. Then, of course, around that same time, the infamous shooting in the hotel in the lobby of Bad Boy Studio, to which he squarely blamed P. Diddy, then known as Puff Daddy. Of course, we're talking about Sean Combs. And he also blamed Notorious B.I.G., Christopher Wallace, a man who, up until that incident, he had been very good friends with, and that he had helped put on. See, that's a forgotten fact. Everybody thinks Sean Puffy Combs did put Notorious B.I.G., Christopher Wallace on. He did put him on. But people forget that Tupac actually helped him just as much get his name out there. But for whatever reason, Tupac, and it's never been proven to this day, Tupac and Biggie had that falling out after that shooting. Then, of course, it led to one thing or another. Of course, he got signed with Death Row, and Death Row was trying to sign him long before that incident, because he was like the hottest rapper at that time, the hottest rap artist at that time. Death Row was the hottest rap label at that time. Bad Boy had not even been in existence till like mid to late 90s, mid to late 90s was their prime. Death Row was actually the top label, and they were trying to get Tupac to sign. Tupac, of course, was mainly with Interscope at that time, and Interscope had helped him out of a lot of situations. The situation with the police officer, like when he got into it with them, and the police officer and his partner beat up Tupac in the middle of the street. I mean, there was all kinds of charges. I mean, you can look them up for yourselves. But then when the rape charge happened, pretty much Interscope left Tupac for dead at that point. Suge Knight came along and said, hey, I'll bail you out of jail if you sign with Death Row and make this record. He not only made the record, I think All Eyes on Me with Death Row ended up being one of his top selling records ever. I mean, you, my listeners, you can confirm this for me if you confirm this for me, but I think it was his top selling album ever. I could be wrong on that, but I know it was one of his top selling albums while he was living. And then, of course, Death Row was at its height because you had Tupac on the label. You had Suge Knight, the mastermind, or at least a perceived mastermind. You had Dr. Dre, who was a rapper in his own right, but a dope producer. You had Snoop Doggy Dogg there. Basically, they were, if I may dare say, the four horsemen of Death Row Records. But then there was still the situation with Tupac, which this is when I started falling out of favor with Tupac a little bit, because I felt like he was becoming less of the introspective and thoughtful man that he was beforehand, despite, the fact that he was prone to be a little emotional and get himself in these situations. I thought of him as very intelligent. But then when he got with Death Row, this more ghetto, shall we say, drama queen, and I say, and I'm probably going to take off some listeners saying this, but mangina type of side of him came out. He started picking fights in rap songs, particularly the song Hit 'Em Up, where I remember, and this is an actual quote from there, where he actually aimed it at Notorious B.I.G., where he said, "You claim to be a player, but I fucked your wife." And he dissed Lil' Kim, said something about Mobb Deep, talking about they got sickle cell, they need to die, Basically just saying all kinds of hateful stuff. And what was so mind-boggling was on the streets and with a bunch of black people at that time, this was so cool and so hip. I was one of the few black people that thought that was like, no, this is wrong. Even though that song is in my music collection, I refuse to play it. I have not played it since about 1996. So about 20 years. I have not played that song in 20 years. Even though it's in my collection, I refuse to play that tune to this day. The only reason I keep it is for basically historical purposes, in case I just want to make a point to somebody or something. But other than that, I refuse to play it, so because to me that song was disgusting. Not to mention, as an older man now, what you do in the dark is your business. Now, I'm not saying him and Faith Evans did in fact have sex, because let's be honest, Notorious B.I.G. was no saint. He was dogging out his wife Faith and Lil' Kim, with Lil' Kim and others. He was actually dogging out both of them. He was telling both of them bullshit. Meanwhile, he was banging other women besides them. We know of Charlie Baltimore, but there was reportedly several other women. It got to the point where even Puff Daddy was getting sick, or P. Diddy as he's known now, was getting sick of Notorious B.I.G. in his ways. Basically where he just told him, like, hey, you're screwing with my money. To the point where Faith and Biggie were having fights backstage at shows. P. Diddy reportedly had to send him home had to send him, finally just took him off the tour after he demanded that Faith be taken off the tour. But here's the thing, even though Notorious B.I.G. had his popularity, Faith was also a moneymaker, and he felt like Notorious B.I.G. was the one that was putting his money at risk, more so than Faith. So he sent Notorious B.I.G., even though he was good friends with him. He was like, look, you my boy, but you're fucking with my money. You gotta go. You gotta go. And, you know, I'm sure he was mad at the time, but he understood. And I'm not saying Faith did sleep with Tupac, but my gut feeling is that he did. But the way Tupac went about it and basically just blabbed it out there, I'm like, no, dude. True players, true bad boys don't talk about their business in the light. If you, in fact, and I'm talking like Tupac's still alive, but if he, in fact, took Faith for whatever reason, and I'm going to go into why I believe if it did happen, why they did it, if for whatever reason you and Faith decide to go somewhere, be alone, get butt naked, and you decide to give her that penetration, that should have been kept between you and her. You did your business, keep it moving, and keep it to yourself. Because not everybody needs to know about that. Now, as for why I think they did it, if in fact it happened, I think it went down because Tupac, you know, he saw an opportunity to get some booty. Let's be honest, Faith was a fairly good-looking woman, had a nice little body. He saw an opportunity to get him some booty and a way to stick it to, shall we say, Notorious B.I.G. For Faith, it was about revenge. I think she let Tupac hit it, if she did. Let's assume she did. She did it out of revenge. And she wanted Notorious B.I.G., her estranged husband, to know what it felt like when your significant other steps out on you. Because in Notorious B.I.G.'s mind, reportedly, she was married to him, but he could still do whatever he wants, which that's a bad way to approach marriage. If that's your viewpoint of a relationship, stay single, dude. Seriously, just stay single. Because once you're married, it should be about you and that person. That's it. It ain't about just you anymore. But getting back to Tupac, he kind of lost my respect a little bit. Now, as for the death of Tupac, there's all kinds of stories about it being a setup and this and that. There's even reports that Suge Knight even set him up. I don't think so. Because why would Suge Knight be in the car with Tupac if he really wanted him dead and risk getting shot himself? That doesn't make sense. So, no, I don't buy that. Now, do I think it's possible he may have arranged the death of Notorious B.I.G.? Maybe. If only because out of retribution. But by that time, Suge Knight was going through his own troubles, so I'm not sure he would have been able to put that together. Not saying he didn't, but there's no way to know that he did. But my overall view of Mr. Tupac Shakur is a great rap artist, even a pretty good actor, actually, too. He was very trained in acting. Very intelligent man. But towards the end, he started falling off the rails. And I think even he started realizing it towards the end. Unfortunately, he realized it too late, in my opinion. He'll always be a legend, but towards the end, for me personally, he did fall somewhat in my eyes. I mean, he didn't take like an O.J. Simpson level fall, or going to my pro wrestling fandom, he didn't take like a Chris Benoit type of fall, but still, he fell a little bit, but he's still somebody that, you know, when you talk about the history of hip hop and rap music, you can't tell the story without mentioning Tupac somewhere. There's certain names you cannot omit. It's hard to omit guys like Run DMC, Sugar Hill Gang, LL Cool J, Will Smith, back when he was the Fresh Prince. You can't omit Big Daddy Kane, in my opinion. NWA, Ice-T, Public Enemy, Notorious B.I.G. Tupac has to be in that list. There are certain guys you cannot, if you tell the history of rap music and the story of rap music, there are certain guys you cannot omit. And I think he's one of those you have to tell his story. So basically, that's my views of Tupac. If you like this podcast, you can download it off of Spreaker.com under Irvin V. Griffin Jr. Podcast channel. You could also find this on Irvin Griffin, a.k.a. Mr. Griffin, on YouTube and on Twitter. My handle is Griff Phoenix. Anyway, that's all I got to say this morning. Y'all have a good day, folks. Apocalypse. Ever once I was down with niggas.